I have censored myself before because I didn't want to get targeted on Twitch or YouTube or things like that. But I think it's about time we actually look at the science, we look at the data, and we recognize that for a large portion of transgender people, they have serious mental health issues. Serious mental health issues. And this is being worsened by the way that we are treating them. We are making these people deranged. And I'm not going to bury the lead. Many studies show that a majority of transgender people have personality disorders. Personality disorders are extremely dangerous individuals. If the research is true that, let's say, 50% of transgender people have personality disorders, specifically narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder, then half of all trans people that you come to are a threat to everyone around them and their family. That is not a joke. That is not an exaggeration. And that is not fear-mongering. That is not some made-up shit. People with NPD and BPD are dangerous to everyone who seeks a relationship with them. They will abuse you. They will manipulate you. They will use you. They will steal from you. They will lie about you. They will gaslight you. They will find ways to harm you. Okay? And so, yeah, let's begin. All right, so I want to look at testosterone because I think it also plays a role. We're going to pull this up. We're going to look at this in just a minute. The first thing I want to do is I want to find how testosterone is sold to the transgender community.
Ronald Reagan.
Okay? Because this is really important. So when you're trying to find information about whether or not you should take testosterone and what the effects of testosterone will be to you, one of the places that you might find is University of California, San Francisco, information on testosterone hormone therapy, right? This is just like general information to the public. So when we go down to the emotional state changes, this is what University of San Francisco wants people that are looking for this information to kind of find out. Where'd it go? Here we go. So the second area of impact of hormone therapy is on your emotional state. Puberty is a roller coaster of emotions, and the second puberty that you will experience during your transition is no exception. First of all, it's not a second puberty. You can already see how this is getting away from science and informing you of the effects and getting into affirming language and selling you the idea of the positive aspects of gender affirmation. You're going to go through your second puberty. Remember all those problems you had with puberty? Don't worry about those. It's just a second puberty. Not a second puberty. You may find that you have access to a narrower range of emotions or feelings, or have different interests, tastes, or pastimes, or behave differently in relationships with other people. For most people, things usually settle down after a period of time. Some people, this is really important here. For most people, right? So most people, things usually settle down after a period time. They don't explain what that period of time is. And they say most people. Remember how I said they manufacture their own science? I'll explain how the science is manufactured in a minute, but I want you to think about how vague this terminology is as they're selling testosterone to people. Some people experience little or no change in their emotional state. What's little? I don't know. I encourage you to take the time to learn new things about yourself and sit with new or unfamiliar feelings and emotions while you explore and familiarize yourself with them. Right? So you're going to discover your gendered soul. That's what they're really talking about here. This is queer theory laden propaganda that isn't actually talking about the science of what occurs to your emotional state when you are undertaking testosterone. While psychotherapy is not for everyone, many people find that working with a therapist while in transition can help you to explore these new thoughts and feelings, get to know your new body and self, and help you with things like coming out to family, friends, or coworkers and developing a greater level of self-love and acceptance. Now, this is the entire section on emotional changes. But here's the whole section on physical changes. Here's the whole intro, way shorter than the intro, way shorter than the physical changes. Here's, about a little bit smaller than the sexual changes, reproductive system changes, risks. So let's look at risk. While cisgender men do not have higher rates of cholesterol-related disorders and heart disease than cisgender women, the available research on transgender men taking testosterone has generally not found these differences. So you're starting with a thing that isn't a risk. Why are you couching a section titled risks with, hey man, this isn't a risk? Most of the research on risk of heart disease and strokes in transgender men suggests that risk does not increase once testosterone is begun. However, long-term definitive studies are lacking. They're telling you that there's no risk in the area titled risk as you begin, like that's how they're couching it. This is from University California, San Francisco, right? This is just like the second thing I found on Google, right? I was just like, well, how are they selling this to people? However, long-term definitive studies are lacking. It has been suggested that the risk of other conditions such as diabetes or being overweight is increased by masculinizing testosterone therapy. However, actual research supporting these claims are limited.
Well, yeah, because there's no longer-term definitive studies.
And then, of course, they talk about the thickness of your blood. So then they'll give you risks that are a little bit more definitive, right? This can be a particular problem. This can be prevented by maintaining an appropriate dose and through blood tests to monitor blood and hormone levels.
So they can start prescribing you blood thinners.
Mm-hmm. So I want you to remember for later on in the stream here in a little while, this can be a particular problem if you are taking a dose that is too high for your body's metabolism. This can be prevented by maintaining an appropriate dose and through blood tests to monitor blood and hormone levels. I promise I will explain this later. And then, of course, data is limited and they go through certain other things, et cetera, et cetera. They even go on to talk about how prostate cancer is not a problem because you don't have a prostate, which is like, again, why are you putting this in the risk category? It's like, it's not a risk, so you put it in the risk category. They sell you a bunch of non-risks. Let's look at a piece of actual science, as opposed to something that you might read just out there randomly. So there's many studies on the relationship between testosterone and aggression. Some studies will find no causal link and a slight correlation. Some studies will find a very strong one. The real answer, as we can see here, is, well, I'll just read the abstract, right? And this is a meta-analysis. This is taking a bunch of different data from a bunch of different studies in 2000 to determine the relationship between testosterone and aggression. In non-human animals, the relationship between testosterone and aggression is well established. In humans, the relationship is more controversial. To clarify the relationship, Archer conducted 3 meta-analyses and found a weak positive relationship between testosterone and aggression. Unfortunately, each of the analyses only include 5 to 6 studies. The aim of the present study was to re-examine the relationship between testosterone and aggression with a larger sample of studies. Present analyses are based on 45 independent studies with an N value of 9,760 with 54 independent effect sizes. Only studies that reported a p-value or effect size were included in the analysis, and the sample may underestimate the proportion of non-significant findings in the population. Correlations ranged from negative 0.28, which is to say testosterone made you less aggressive, hilariously enough, all the way to 0.71, which is an extreme correlation. Like at those levels, you're basically talking about testosterone is what causes aggression. The mean weighted correlation, R equals 0.14, corroborates Arching's finding of a weak positive relationship. What do we have here? Throughout the entire spectrum, there seems to be some studies that are very extreme in one degree or another, but we have a weak correlation that testosterone, increased testosterone production, or having more testosterone giving to you, or, human growth hormone and roid rage are a real thing. That when you take testosterone, you become more aggressive. Well, what were we just looking at, Mark? Before we started talking about the science, what were we talking about?
Are you referencing the police footage we were just watching?
Right before that, what was the big theme that the police footage was surrounded around? If you had to zoom way out, what were we talking about?
A school shooting.
Yeah, by a trans man who was taking doses of testosterone.
Probably be a negative 0.28, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, less aggressive. Exactly. You got it. So recognize that we have this second puberty, as they like to put it, as you discover your gendered soul.
Look, as a young boy going through my first puberty, I remember I lashed out quite a bit.
Yeah. So here's the thing. The hormonal changes that transgender people get when they're taking testosterone or estradiol or progesterone is much, much larger than a woman on her period. Sorry if you're a female here and you're a little bit offended by that, but I think all the dudes here know that when they're around a female on their period, they act differently. And what we're talking about is orders of magnitude higher than that. Emotional changes, hormonal balance changes, behavioral changes, sexual changes, etc. But that's not the full story. Remember when I said that they will make their own science? Well, you can look into this yourself. I'm not going to pull up dozens of studies for you right now. I looked at them, and I'm only showing you the studies that I want to read through. But there are plenty of studies that test testosterone levels and effects on testosterone levels in transgender men. What's the problem with all of these studies? Is that all of these studies have very closely looked at blood work, and they have an endocrinologist that is tracking their hormone levels. Well, why is that a problem? Well, I'll explain to you why that's a problem. But it's better if I have a study from Nature and Infomed.org. Here we'll have this little thing here. So insurance coverage and use of hormones among transgender respondents to a national survey. We look at this. I don't feel like unlocking this because the important part is already here. So what do we have here? We undertook a study to assess the associations between barriers to insurance coverage for gender-affirming hormones, either lack of insurance or claim denial, and patterns of hormone use among transgender adults. Methods. They use data from the U.S. Transgender Survey with a large sampling size of over 27,000. Okay? And this is August to September of 2015. So this is 8 years ago when the whole transgender craze and shipping medicine to yourself and all of these things was less common. So this is years ago when it was much less common to self-medicate. Results of 12,000 transgender adults using hormones, 9.17% were using non-prescription hormones.
Can you zoom in a little more for us?
Okay, I found one that works. Okay. Results of 12,000 transgender adults using hormones, 9.17% were using non-prescription hormones. Among uninsured respondents, 21% roughly reported that their claims were denied. Use of non-prescription hormones was more common among respondents who were uninsured or whose claims were denied. Uninsured respondents were also less likely to be using hormones. So, here we have insurance issues, and what we're recognizing that 10% of people are using non-prescription, okay? They're giving themselves whatever they feel like is the appropriate amount of hormone therapy. It's 1 in 10. 1 in 10 are they have no prescription from no endocrinologist or doctor. They're just taking whatever the fuck they feel like works. And if you are in the transgender Reddits or Twitter space at all, you will see this all of the time where transgender activists are saying they're gatekeeping, they're not giving you enough. You need to take a double dose. Like, my girlfriend wasn't taking enough, and then she took a double dose of estradiol, and she, doubled up her progesterone. And yeah, sure, she got kind of sick for a little while, but then her breasts were tender and she started to grow buds. And that's just because they're gatekeeping. These horrible doctors are not prescribing you enough. But don't take my word for it, right? Don't take anecdotal evidence from Twitter, right? Like, I told you guys that I would look at relevant research to make these claims. So here you go. Okay, so this is published September 7th, 2022. So this is much newer, right? This is published in Humanities and Social Sciences Communications. Okay? So why don't we look at, we can just see it in the abstract. Overall, 24% of trans individuals took more hormones than prescribed. That's 1 in 4 are taking more than what their doctor is prescribing. And all of the fucking research in science is based off of people that are having their hormone levels tracked by endocrinologists, that are having regular blood work. And 57% are taking less. Taking more hormones than prescribed was significantly associated with having the same provider for primary and gender-affirming care and gender-based discrimination. Income and insurance coverage barriers were significantly associated with taking less hormones than prescribed. Differences by gender identity were also observed. Addressing barriers to hormone access and costs could help to ensure safe hormone dosing behaviors and the achievement trans people's gender-affirming goals. What kind of doctor is prescribing this stuff? Read Dreamland, I believe is what the book is called. Is it Dreamland? I've read it, but now I can't remember the fucking title.
Yeah, that's not really one of my things.
Yeah, I was right. Dreamland by Sam Quinones. Okay? Amazing book. It is about the opioid epidemic and how pharmaceutical companies, doctors, all of these people pushed and made the opioid epidemic so much worse. And there's a really interesting thing about how it was such a middle class, like, white thing that there was the Los Zeos boys or something were doing deliveries and shipments like it was like with like packaging like it was Grubhub as a means of like selling heroin to people. But there's wonderful ways of how they explain exactly how this happens. The way that this works is that doctors now are subject to reviews, and hospitals are subject to those reviews. And if you don't affirm people the way that they want to be affirmed, you risk losing your job, because they will write poor reviews and talk about how terrible of a doctor you are. And most people, when they go to the doctor, they don't attempt to write reviews or raise a stink if their doctor just does their job. Furthermore, there's tons of the APA, the AMA, the ACA, all of these organizations are now activist organizations that are granted a state monopoly. So if you want a license to practice counseling in the state of Virginia, you have to be ACA accredited. You probably needed to go to a university that was CACREP accredited. And in order to maintain your license, it's not the state that'll take your license away, it's the ACA. And the ACA is an activist organization that is completely infiltrated with woke academics. So you can get your license removed if a transgender person says that you harmed them by not giving them gender affirming care. They're all of these doctors are terrified to lose their license, and they know that if they say no, that person will just go to the next doctor anyways. That literally they stood up for no reason, because they're just going to doctor shop to the next person. So, you have made up science about the effects of testosterone on people and their levels of aggression. As you saw earlier, I showed you an article from the Federalist where they were breaking down the numbers. It is a myth that transgender people are targeted for violence at a higher rate than any other demographic, once you control for variables such as prostitution and drug use. So they are lying about them being victims in that regard. They are lying about the effects that these medications have on people's body, and they're doubling down on their lies and their queer theory when they present it to people to try and get them in the door to taking these dangerous medications. None of these people have informed consent. And worse, a quarter of these people are just getting multiple prescriptions or illegally buying drugs and taking massive doses, and they're not captured in this. So I'm curious, was that shooter on a double or triple dose of testosterone and was just losing their shit because of the medication and all of the lies and different people saying that that's okay, that endocrinologists don't know what they're talking about? I don't know.
Or were they even going to an endocrinologist?
Right? Thank you for the sub. I appreciate it. So let's continue on. I want to take a little bit of a breather, and I want to look at the way, remember how I said that social contagion is real, that parents push this on their children, and that there is an ideology that is making up fake science that pushes people towards this? I mean, all the evidence you need, what I want you to do is I want you to go to Twitter one day, and I want you to do an advanced search for the egg emoji. The shit that you see will horrify you, because the transgender community loves to use the egg emoji as a means of saying this is someone that hasn't come out of their shell and we need to crack eggs, and that sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet, and that we need to trans this person because really they don't know that they're trans, but we can convince them that they're trans if we give them enough information. Should trans surgery be banned for minors? So I take a very radical approach to this. It's a little bit different. I don't think you should ban surgery for minors. What I think you should do is I think you should make it completely legitimate and perfectly legal, and have standing in the courts for any detrans adult to sue any doctor's office, any surgeon, and any psychotherapist that pushed them towards gender affirming care, and basically saying, I was a minor, I could not consent. You had my care in your hands, and I regret these things. And now that I'm able to consent, I can tell you that I did not want to do these things now that I understand the actions and how they occurred as a minor. And those surgeons and those psychiatrists should be responsible for their hormone treatment and whatever surgeries they need to restore their body to its natural condition for the rest of their lives. I think what this will do is this will skyrocket malpractice insurance rates for people doing gender affirming care in any regard. It will reduce the amount of available clinics, and of the people that do them, they will be demanding a high standard of evidence that this person has been presenting with gender dysphoria from a very young age, and it's persistent without desisting. Right? Like, they will be like, okay, you want me to fucking put your kid on androgen therapy? Cool. I want to see the family photos and Facebook posts from when they were 3 years old saying they were a girl, and then I want to see them when they were 4, and I want to see them when they were 5. I want to see them when they're 6. And now that I have this 10-year-old, I want documented evidence that this person has been claiming that they're a girl for the last 7 years, and no matter how much you try and convince them otherwise, they keep exhibiting that behavior. And then they'll do it. And sometimes it will be a gamble, and they'll be wrong, and they will have committed a crime involuntarily and damaged a child's body without their consent. But it will be very rare, because the market will ensure that it's very rare. Because I don't know, and I cannot tell you that I do know, what that person's will as an emergent adult will be. What I can tell you is that permanently scarring a child with physical surgeries that they don't need yet is a real big risk if they determine as an adult that they did not want those things. That you are committing a crime if it turns out that they did not want that, and that you must pay restitution and restoration, which will likely be millions of dollars. So you better have that be a very rare occurrence. That's how I look at it. I don't think that you need to ban it, because I do think there are buck angels out there, right? Like people that were 2 years old playing dress up and were always felt like a boy, and that probably was the best course of action for them. And I think Buck Angel could have saved himself a lot of drug abuse and a lot of heartache if he had had androgen therapy as a teenager and had hormone replacement therapy without going through puberty. But I think those people are exceedingly rare, and that you never know.
There's no guarantees.
In lieu of that system, I'll take a ban. I think a ban is the less authoritarian thing to do there, but it is authoritarian nevertheless. So it won't get my support. Was that a good enough answer? I hope that was a good enough answer.